our rec meeting ran a little long.
Yeah, I saw that pretty building and garage. Last thing I know, remember we were out there sweating feet at the groundbreaking. It was hot as I don't know what out there.
It's gone faster than everybody expected for some reason.
Yeah,
They feel like it's really moved along.
And for whatever reason, I had been driving on that side of town, and it came back and just like Shazam, man. Boy, that thing has really gotten up there.
I haven't come back into town at night, but somebody was telling me it was kind of nice to see with all the lights on each of the floors.
Oh, okay.
So I'll have to drive in one of these evenings. Typically when I leave, it's pretty late and don't get back. So.
Listen, we took the kids to the, well, not kids, grandkids to the aquarium yesterday, and boy, they've changed. We had only been there a little bit more than a year ago, and they've made some nice changes over there. So anybody's thinking about carrying or even going to the aquarium, it's spaced out very nice, by the way. They let you in by time, and so it's, it's usually a little madhouse in there, but not now. It's very well spaced out. Okay. So, Mr. Chairman, I think you might have a shorter meeting than Public Works today. Maybe.
I may have what for Public Works today?
I said you may have it. Yeah, you may have it.
Yeah. Oh, I forgot about that. You beat my record last time. I forgot.
I know.
No one's going to ever complain about us finishing our work in record time.
You're right about that.
What meeting was before us this afternoon? Was it TNT meeting?
Recreation.
What was it?
Recreation?
Oh, rec. Oh, those always go over. So we're waiting for the mayor to catch his breath.
Yes, sir. And you do have a quorum right now.
Hey, Rick. Do you know if the mayor's ready?
He's getting ready to sign
Drew?
on now, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. There he is. All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this meeting of real estate on October the 12th, Columbus Day, or as I have been told, it's been renamed as Indigenous Peoples Day by some accounts. So glad to have everybody present on this federally recognized holiday. Councilmember Jackson, you are slated to give us an invocation, so I turn it over to you now.
I'll be privileged. Yes, Heavenly Father, we ask your presence today, and we thank you and give our gratitude to the way that you have established this nation with those indigenous natives who were reports amazing, welcoming inhabitants of a continent that the people who were arriving on these shores had no vision for how it will be developed and made into a place that honors and remembers the humanity and the dignity of each one of us. So help us continue that mission. I pray especially for the increase in the virus in communities that probably had thought they were going to escape its greatest negative impact. So we pray for the doctors and the hospitals to be prepared. And thank you that we have continued to support our medical community. We ask all these things in your name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate it. Ladies and gentlemen, we have our September 21st, 2020 minutes. I hope you've had an opportunity to review those. And I'll take a motion at this time to approve those minutes.
I move for approval, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you. All right, so I will call on, I think Lee Bailey, you would take item number A for us, ma'am.
Yes, Chairman Shade, I'm here and happy to do that. So since around 2012, the city has been under a master lease agreement with EcoVest East Shed Development LLC for the East Shed that's next door to the Children's Museum on Ann Street. And Jeffrey Roberts, as the managing member of the LLC, is proposing a new subtenant to open a new bar and restaurant in the space. And Jeffrey, I believe you're on the call, as well as his attorney, Andy Gowder. And Jeffrey, I don't know if you want to give them any background on the new subtenant and provide them a little bit of information about the project. Jeffrey, are you there?
Hello,
Lee,
Jeffrey.
could you hear me?
Hey,
Lee,
I
could
think
you hear me?
Yeah, I think you were muted.
How about now?
We can hear you now.
Okay, excellent.
Great, thanks.
Since 2012, we answered an RFP that Mayor Riley wanted to bring the Best Friend Train Museum back from Norfolk Southern Railroad, and it was sitting in the headquarters of in their Peachtree Street headquarters in Atlanta, and he had been trying to figure out for about 5 or 6 years how to get the train back. So what we ended up doing is we gave and also revitalized the East Shed, which was approximately a 270-foot long old early 1800s railroad shed that is in between the Children's Museum and the Visitor Center. So what we ended up doing is coming up with an idea that we would spend a significant portion of our capital to build the museum and revitalize the East Shed. Ultimately, the train was placed in there. The city contributed a portion for the museum, and we came up with the balance of the capital to revitalize the East Shed. We then put a tenant in there who spent a few $1 million on the upfit, and unfortunately, he gave it was a really interesting place. He had a chef, a celebrity chef from New York, who came in to run it on sweat equity, and unfortunately, he didn't sweat as much as the equity as the owner would have liked. Ultimately, he didn't make the place close down, and then subsequently, the place has sat vacant.
It was 20 first, 20, the word 20 and then first, and then Century Fox.
Mute unless you're deaf.
I'm having a problem hearing.
Councilmember Waring, mute your phone,
I
please.
know.
Mute your video. Councilmember Waring.
Thank you. I'm having trouble hitting, but my mute is just spinning on me, so I may need to leave and come back in. But,
Lee, could you hear me?
Hey, Jeffrey, yes, we have. I think we're just waiting for everyone else to mute their call until you have wrapped up. So because I think we might be good now. Can you hear us okay?
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Yeah, we lost Councilmember Waring. Hold on 1 second. Let's see if he can log back in.
Okay.
Okay.
Bethany, can you tell if he's trying to log back in?
He isn't yet, no, sir.
Okay, let's just be at ease for 1 second and let's get Councilmember Waring back on the meeting.
Councilmember, he's not logging back on yet. I don't know if he needed to take that phone call that he was on. That may have been what he was gonna do.
Okay.
All right,
Let's
so
go ahead and proceed.
let me know. Okay,
Go ahead,
Lee.
Jeffrey.
Okay, so again, bringing it up from 2012 up until 2019, the prior tenant in there tried to make a go of it. He spent millions of dollars on the upfit as we spent prior to him, revitalizing and restoring the entire shell of the 270-foot East Shed building, and additionally built the museum, which the train was put in there approximately 2013. So the tenant made a go of it. He was not sustainable. The tenant left the premises. The architecture of it that the tenant wanted certainly did not lend itself for as much as we would like to the activation of the courtyard, the public promenade, and visibility into the building, which is just absolutely magnificent with the giant rafters. I think Mayor Tecklenburg is very familiar with this building, having been familiar with NBM doing the first upfit for the giant timber beams in the ceiling, in the rafter system and everything else. So what we have is, this is a very unique and challenging space because it is so large and really requires an operator with considerable heft. We had the tenant that was interested in going into this, and we had been working with city officials, probably since, I would say, October of 2019 and then forward. And we had the tenant ready to commit to going in there. But unfortunately, March 17th is a big day for everybody when the pandemic hit. So it had to we recalibrated it. We ended up bringing the tenant back, albeit under post-pandemic terms. And right now it is a group that is opening up a facility that will primarily be food forward with a low country coastal cuisine that will be open from 8 o'clock in the morning, serving breakfast through lunch, I think, till 4 o'clock. And then it will be open for dinner and cocktail service. The group is a seasoned, very well-funded group. The principals also own on King Street Uptown Social, and they are very active in civic affairs. We have worked hand in glove with Helen Hill from Convention and Visitors Bureau, along with Doug Warner, and there's a tremendous symbiosis going back and forth, where we feel this tenant is not only capable of doing this, operating this facility, paying the rent, sustainable, but will work hand in glove in activation of this portion of the public realm. And in addition, plans on spending between $1.5 to $2 million of additional upfit on something that is already BAR approved and permit ready, along with the Mayor's Council for City Design. It is a magnificent new design, which basically opens it up far better and activates this promenade. And we think this tenant at a central casting will propagate not only a great sustainable rent-paying tenant, but operate hand in glove with the city officials, activate this promenade, and work hand in glove with Helen and Doug at CVB. Any other questions, Lee?
I don't know. I don't know if any of the council members have any questions at this
Let's
point.
hold off on this part for 1 second. So this is what's before council. Is there a motion to approve this?
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the document as it's in front of us. I can't tell if we're actually supposed to the subtenant, because we
The
didn't get
motion
any.
to approve the third amendment to bring in a new tenant to this property.
Are we
I'll
supposed to be-
second.
Sir, are we supposed to be naming the subtenant, or just saying we're approving the subtenant as described?
So Councilmember
Lee,
Jackson, sure. So the subtenant will be 23 Ann Street Restaurant LLC. And the way that the consent and third amendment to the lease agreement is written, it just approves this specific subtenant. So it's specifically as to this LLC.
Maybe
That
I
answers your
missed it
question?
then in the, well, I can't see in the actual 18-page document we received today where that name appears. So maybe I just missed it or it's in an
Okay,
exhibit.
let
that
me,
we didn't. So that was why I'm fine to do it that way. I just didn't know if we were supposed to name
Okay.
it.
So there's a
So
motion
it's,
on the floor. Is there a second?
Yeah, I second it, yeah.
Okay. All right. Now we go into general discussion. Mr. Mayor? Mr.
So,
Mayor?
First, can you hear me?
yes.
Can you hear me?
Mr. Mayor, you broke up on us. I'm sorry.
How's that? Can you hear me?
That's a little bit better.
Okay, testing, 1, 2, 3. So, just for full disclosure and acknowledgement of, well, first of all, I want to thank Jeffrey Roberts for bringing this to us, because since the closure of that space, it's been deactivated and we need to bring life back. And to be able to pull that off during the aftermath of and in the midst of coronavirus, frankly, is remarkable. And the fact that the tenants are willing to invest at least $1.5 million up to $2 million to improve our property is even almost incredible. But along with that, just for full acknowledgement, I didn't hear them mention it, there is a rent concession that we've made for the first initial year, I think it was. And then after that, we should recover our full rent after they get back in business, because we'll be able to get a percentage of rent addition based on a percentage of sales. So I just think it's a great opportunity, but I did want to acknowledge that concession exists. But the fact that they're investing over or at least $1.5 million into the property and reactivating it all again, which is badly needed, I think it's well worth the relatively minor concession that we've made.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Anybody else have a question or a comment about this proposed lease? So it sounds like this is an overall good deal for the city. As the mayor said, they're making a huge investment in this. Considering the circumstances, this is pretty incredible, and a lot of faith in where we're supposed to be headed in the next several years. Yes, sir, Mr. Waring.
Mr. Chairman, my thing is kind of messing up here, but anyway, I got kind of knocked off when you're talking about.
Yep, you're still
sweat
breaking
equity.
up
Didn't
a
have
little
enough
bit.
sweat.
Councilmember
But how
Waring.
long has it been dormant, basically vacant? Okay.
Councilman, it's been dormant, Jeff Roberts, it's been dormant, I would think probably for, right now, maybe I'm just close, about 15 months, sometime in that area.
Okay. Okay, good. Thank you.
Any
Mayor,
other
thank
questions?
you for the kind words.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, we'll call the question. All those in favor of this under item A of approving a new subtenant under the terms of this current master lease, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? The ayes have it. All right. We'll leave, and Jeffrey, thank you for that update, and let's move forward and get this thing before City Council tomorrow. The
Thank
next
you so
item
much,
on our
everyone.
agenda. Thank you, sir. There's a lease for single parking space. Leah, you handling this one as well?
Our parking manager, Peter Rasco, is on the line, and he has been working on this, so I'll let him speak about it.
That's be good. Thank you, sir. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. This is a proposal for the renewal of an existing holdover tenancy of a single parking space on Coombe Street, which is a part of the city's Concord Cumberland Garage Complex. It's at the rear of what you might know as slightly north of Broad Restaurant on East Bay Street. I've been working on this fairly lengthy time now, but it's a renewal of a lease that had expired, and they had continued to pay rent on the single parking space for a dumpster for many years. And now we've finally getting them under a lease, hopefully, so there'll be some cleanup measures for that site. The tenant is 188-192 East Bay Street horizontal property regime. And they consist of 4 restaurants and 10 offices. So all those tenants would be using the dumpster, and they have been using the dumpster for about 17 years now. The term we've got them on is proposed as a year-to-year term, and the city would have a 30-day cancellation clause at the end of each year if we so desired to cancel it. We've also placed in the lease some stronger cleanup measures. One is to have them tip the dumpster 6 times a week instead of previous 4 times a week. And we've also got some stronger reporting requirements for the unsightliness of the dumpster, which is the main problem we've been up against over the years, apparently. The rent is based on the lost revenue that the city would have for one space based on the average of the previous year's revenue for metered parking space along that section of Cone Street. So they'll be paying that this year based on 2019. I'll be glad to try to answer any questions.
Okay. Is there a motion on the floor to approve this lease for the single parking space?
I'll move for approval, Mr. Chairman.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. All right, any further discussions or questions for Peter regarding this? I don't think we've ever had a lease for just one parking space. So I was taking a little back by it. I know parking spaces in Charleston go for a high premium, like in the hundreds of thousands of dollars on some locations. So like, whoa, hang on. All right. Any other questions, concerns, or input? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you, Peter, for that
Thank
quick
you.
update.
Thank you.
Okay, the next 2 items are things that I have requested that we get some discussion on. One is an archaeology ordinance. I will tell you that when I got elected, soon after I got elected back in 2015, I was brought in 2016. I did receive a visit with someone concerning an archaeology ordinance. It sort of kind of floated around for a while and was kicked around a little bit and discussed, but nothing ever materialized. And I've spoken with Jacob Lindsay about this before. And I guess it kind of rejuvenated when we started having discussions about lining island. And then several weeks ago, there was an article in the paper, the Post and Courier, concerning grave sites located downtown. And so before we let Jacob run off to the hills in Colorado, I wanted to capture him and talk a little bit about the feasibility of an archaeology ordinance and what else may be available by state law to sort of fill in that gap as to some issues that pop up from time to time with issues dealing with where people are either renovating or new construction or things of that nature throughout the city. So Jacob, if you don't mind, go ahead and grabbing that bull by the horn for me, please. There you are.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll do my best to wrestle that bull a little bit. So what I'll do, Mr. Chairman, if it's okay with you, is just give a little bit of a brief overview of some of the discussions we've had and where we stand in regards to an archaeological ordinance, if that's okay with you. Maybe 3 to 5 minutes introduction.
Sure.
Perfect. So first of all, a lot of folks have worked on this already during the course of the year, including Sterling Halverson in our legal department, who's done some great research as well. And maybe just to briefly orient the members of the committee, as you all know, Charleston is the birthplace of preservation in the nation, beginning with the creation of the BAR in 1931. But we have never regulated archaeological artifacts that reside on private property. Therefore, we don't have a governmental staff around this. We don't really have a budget around it or processes that relate to it. So it's sort of not dissimilar to I don't know, something like regulating air quality. It's a good thing to do. It's something that some governments do, but not something that our government has historically done. So it's a new area for us. And staff have worked on a draft ordinance with planning and legal together. And we've created a draft ordinance that anticipates, again, a sort of an expansion of government review that would be a part of the development review process. And should it be adopted, it wouldn't directly affect or get into the burial ground issue, as that is something that's regulated by state law surrounding relocation of human remains and relocation of historic cemeteries. But it would create a process around the discovery of artifacts and the documentation of artifacts on private development sites. So we did request funding for this in the last budget year, but it frankly didn't make the final cut. As you all know, our budget's under duress, and the ordinance really isn't effective because there would be no enforcement without staff around it. We would have ordinances that are unenforceable, which is not something that we would recommend. So we could create a light version of this that would be something like a resolution. But again, that's not recommended because we would have no teeth around which to enforce it. So what we have right now is an ordinance around this that is not funded to move forward. Now, with that said, we could consider putting together a task force to work on this, to move it forward if we think that funding might become available in the 2022 budget. And we could look at other ways of stating a resolution that would be in support of archaeology in the city, that might give a fair warning to property owners that it's something that we're focused on. So what we have is a lot of good work that's been done, but again, it sort of hinges on our ability to fund it. The last thing I'll say about this item, and then I'll move on to just a brief introduction on the burial grounds issue, is that other governments that we've looked at who do this, Alexandria is one that's often cited, have a budget and a process around this. The city of Alexandria owns and operates their city museum. It's one of their city's departments. So they have 6 or 7 staff who are professionals in archaeology, and they do this every day. So they regulate that because they have it as one of their city departments, which is a model and a great thing to do. But of course, we don't operate our Charleston Museum as a department of the city. So the second item around the burial grounds issue, this is something that, again, has been so much discussion about this, especially in relation to Lining Island or Linning Island or Ghost Island or whatever you might prefer to call it. A lot of discussion around this, and it's something that the city, I think, has endeavored to try to solve. And we have met with a local archaeologist in Amur and discussed it. And if we don't adopt an ordinance specifically around this, we still have the state statutes to lean on. And they look at the coroner, they look at SHPO regulations, they have a whole DHEC processes that govern discovery of human remains and relocation of historical burial grounds. And should the council be minded to pass additional regulation around this matter, what I would recommend is that staff, along with the professional archaeologists in the community, do some additional research into the state statutes and the city's processes around them in order to better address the matter. It may be that we can tighten up the way that we do business without expanding staff, without passing new ordinances, to simply direct the city staff, if they believe that we are discovering human remains, that they can quickly act to inform the contractors, inform the owners, and then engage the processes at the state level that would enable them to begin that discussion with DHEC, do subsurface discovery right out of the gate. And we just need to do a little bit more research on that if council is minded to pursue that further. So again, this is it's a complex issue. It's not a simple one. It is something that I think is good to do. And I think we are all minded to increase the level of awareness that we have around archaeological artifacts in our city. But we need funding and staff in order to more thoroughly engage it. And I think it's something, frankly, that needs more discussion, but at the moment, largely dependent on budget. So with that, I'll end that report and hand it back over to you, Council Member, Mr. Chairman, for discussion.
Thank you, Jacob. And I think that the last thing that you had addressed would include sort of a protocol or checklist in the event of, so that staff knew exactly what to do on that occasion in which human remains were found, or maybe even with artifacts being located, what the property owner is supposed to do and how we halt more. Because I think right now that's all done on good faith, isn't it? pretty much.
Well, considering that, Mr. Chairman, today we don't have regulatory power over archaeological artifacts, so we don't ask for a stoppage of work in the case of discovery of pottery or something like that. However, in the case of human remains, yes, when our building inspection staff are made aware of the idea that there is the potential for human remains, they can ask for subsurface exploration, they can ask for ground penetrating radar, they can ask to stop work. We have done those things in the past and routinely do that. We also refer the matter to the state and encourage the collaboration of the owner with the state, depending on which avenue that we're going down. The state makes specific provisions for relocation of historic burial grounds. There's a whole process around that, as well as what to do when you have human remains. So we maybe can just look into, as you said, a checklist, a protocol, what staff should do so that the building inspection staff, when they become aware of this, just simply take steps to inform owners and inform contractors and potentially put a stop work order if necessary to provide information to us so that we can then act appropriately by notifying the correct folks at the state level. And that could be done perhaps even at the staff level just by simply doing a little bit of work into how staff should be directed.
Thank you, Jacob. Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor.
I was going to ask Jacob to share with the committee, isn't it true that under certain circumstances or certain size properties or projects that even without the city having the archaeology ordinance, that the state historic preservation office is engaged? I know I've represented properties before where they were required to have archaeological survey done to satisfy SHPO, as they call it.
That's correct, Mr. Mayor, and that's actually a little bit out of my realm of expertise. I will say this, that first of all, there are many locations throughout the city which are within the jurisdiction of the State Historic Preservation Office. Even our own Low Battery had to go through State Historic Preservation Office review when we were just doing the new design for Low Battery. It also includes many of the landmarked properties all throughout the city. So yes, sir, you're correct that the SHPO have jurisdiction outside of our power over many of the historic and landmark properties and features throughout the city. The criteria, though, in terms of what exactly is on that SHPO list, I'm not an expert in that, and I would need to go talk to my BAR folks or to probably Sterling and Legal, who has a better handle on it in terms of what is and isn't in that purview. But yes, sir, you're correct. We often deal with that and with SHPO's review on many properties throughout the city.
Councilmember Rappel. Yes, sir. Thank you, Jacob.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple comments on this. So I've been involved in some projects before that have undergone various levels of SHPO review. And, one example of where SHPO gets triggered is if you're trying to get a DEC OCRM permit for a dock or community dock or something along those lines. SHPO is one of the boxes that has to get checked in that state permitting process. And I would imagine, if you're doing some sort of substantial development involving, like, say, for example, environmental cleanup or something else that kind of gets DHEC involved, you'd probably have to get involved with SHPO as well. So that's just two kind of examples. There's probably more about the ways in which the State Historic Preservation Office gets involved. The other example of historic and archaeological preservation that I've run into in my practice is through what are called cultural resource surveys. So over in Charleston County, during the PUD process over there, as well as some just routine major subdivisions, if I'm not mistaken, the county actually says, bring us a cultural resource survey. And there are firms around the Southeast that make an inordinate amount of money doing these studies. And they do amazing work. I mean, I'll give you just an example, Ashley Hall Plantation. My client in the Ashley Hall Plantation development has done more work and has paid to have more studies performed on Ashley Hall Plantation than anybody else in the history of South Carolina put together combined. The amount of work that they did on that survey, they broke ground. They published like papers off of this. They found, archaeological shards from Native Americans. They found information about the African Americans that lived on the property. It was incredible. So I bring that up to just say there's this methodology out there that exists. I think that, you know, if we were to pursue that, we'd want to be very careful how wide of a net we cast. I mean, you know, imposing a requirement of this kind on individuals or, you know, low-income communities, I mean, this would make development of their property impossible. I mean, we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars for these types of studies. But, you know, maybe if you're doing a major development somewhere in the city of Charleston, you know, huge development, maybe it's not unreasonable to require a cultural resource survey to be presented to our staff as part of the permitting process. And, you know, in that case, the consultants are the ones that do all the work, do all the analysis, and it's simply a box that's checked in the development review process. It's a very expensive and complicated box, but something that's available. So just thought I'd share those thoughts out there for what it's worth.
And Councilmember Rappel, that property is what you're talking about. That was the site of a major treaty being signed between the American colonists and Indians, and it was a huge historical location. I know there was other controversy with that property, but even there were concerns about what may be located out there. So thanks for your comments.
Mr. Chairman, yeah, thank you. Is this ordinance going to be applied to the entire city? And
well, that's just
what
sort
we're thinking about. Just a historic district.
I don't know.
Historic district.
It's something that I think is just worthy of discussion, and your point is right on target, because we've got Charlestown Landing, and right next to that, the county owns a piece of property that they are developing. Councilman Rappel's property, I don't think at the time was in the city that he's discussing.
Yeah,
but
still not in the city.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, still not in the city.
Yeah, still not in the city. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, this is sort of my thought on this. Is one of the things that Jacob suggested is maybe to take this and have a task force sort of look at some of these loose ends to figure out where to proceed with this. I don't want this to be the end all final discussion on it. I just think it's worthy that we have some more input, even to the point if all we do is just create this protocol as to what do we do in the event of human remains are being found, because it's done all by goodwill right now. And these other issues that y'all brought up, that Councilman Awareness brought up and Councilman Rappel have brought up, are also things that we just need to be sort of kicking around a little bit to decide how do we tie all this in together. Maybe everything that we need is covered by state law already, and we don't need to do anything else except to the point of just saying this is what we're supposed to do when we make these when a property owner makes these kind of discoveries. Anything else from anybody? Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Chairman, just one little comment. I know that a couple of years ago, the two preservation organizations got together, and I don't know if they hired an outside set of consultants, but they did a pretty serious look, I think, and they would, unless they've changed their minds since the last time I've had any connection, I think they would be very happy to see us become more intentional about what we can and can't do in the realm of archaeology protections. I do think that conversation that I remembered the last time was there are people out there, as someone has said, that have the expertise that we wouldn't necessarily have to have a full-time archaeologist on staff. It would be some sort of contract for hire. So I would pose it to those, this Historic Charleston Foundation and the Preservation Society as maybe your next bump in the road to see what their interest would be in helping out with us.
Okay, thank you.
As well as our own history.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Chairman, along those lines, if you were going to convene some folks to opine on this, particularly given the issue of burial grounds and cemeteries. And I would also include the Gullah Society. And we all noted, sadly, the passing of our friend Dr. O this past week. But the Gullah Society specializes in this kind of work, and they have other folks who are very knowledgeable, and I'm sure would be, glad to help out and offer their expertise if you want to convene such a group. I think we kept getting rightfully hung up on this because of funding for staff to be able to do it. The thought of having somebody on call or subcontracted out and not do it up by a staff position, sounds like something reasonable to pursue, and that when certain conditions are triggered, there might have to be a fee by which a development would have to help cover that cost. So it's certainly worth exploring again. I've been wanting personally to move something along, but I've been comforted by the fact that SHPO is there for certain requirements, but for the larger developments where SHPO does not get activated, to have some kind of catch-all, so to speak, or consideration, I think makes sense for us. It's just a matter of doing it without adding, particularly at this point, any new employees or particular expense.
So what I would propose, to pick up what I hear y'all saying and what Jacob recommended, is creating this task force to include a representative from the Preservation Society, the Historic Charleston Foundation, the Gullah Society, and I would throw somebody in from the Charleston Museum as well, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
And then a staff, and someone from the staff from either Jacob's department or some other department, and maybe somebody from the History Commission as well.
Yep.
Okay, so I'm willing to serve on that, and if somebody else wants to join me on that, I'd love company. That would be my request, to create this task force and to look at that and then come back in a couple months' time to see what we're able to put together. Is that agreeable with the committee?
I don't hear any objections.
I will make that
Yes.
report to the full
Good
council
idea.
then, forming that task force. All right, thank you all very much. The next item for discussion, thank you, Jacob, is to talk about donut holes. And again, this is sort of my own personal experience serving on council. I represent several areas within my district of neighborhoods that have been annexed in by piecemeal, literally, particularly when I was canvassing, doing campaigns, you had to check the color of the trash receptacle to see if that person was in your district, was into city limits or not. And there was a little bit of a push from Pinecrest Neighborhood Association when there was some issues coming up with speed bumps and speed enforcement. And then I think probably Councilmember Waring and Councilmember Pell and I have within our different districts, other neighborhoods like Avondale and some other parts along that Sycamore corridor, in which we've got houses that are scattered that are not in our neighborhood. And it just, to me, makes for bad government that you've got two separate entities doing really basic government work, such as policing, fire protection, garbage pickup, things of that nature. Now, I know that we've got wonderful cooperation with St. Andrews Public Service District, for instance, who covers certain areas for us. They don't look at geographical lines on providing for those services, but still, it seems like a waste of government money that we're duplicating services. And some things can be addressed a little bit more efficiently if we can cover up some of these donut holes. So I asked Jacob to also get involved with this project. A well was made to have a discussion of what we can do about that. What's the most efficient way of sort of gathering those dangling participles out there? So Jacob, have you picking back up on this, or somebody else from your office going to talk to us about this?
Oh, I'll also address this one. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And maybe again, just give a brief sort of introduction to this issue and talk about a few options that that you all may want to consider. The first thing is that, as you all know, the city's historically made an effort to annex areas as the city has grown, and not to leave donut holes when at all possible. That's been sort of a long-standing policy of the city. Previously, we have had staff dedicated to this. So there's been annexation coordinators at the city, including in the planning department. We don't have those presently. Those positions have been sunset and moved over to other priorities. But we have previously had efforts around this. It's sort of especially fruitful in West Ashley because our tax rates are advantageous there for citizens, unlike some of the other areas of the city where they may not actually have a lower tax rate if they come into the city. So in West Ashley, it may be especially beneficial to the residents because they have the chance to actually pay lower taxes. For the most part, there are some constraints around doing annexation generally, and that it's very time consumptive. Every single applicant, almost every single applicant who wants to annex in needs a significant amount of time with our city staff to go through the processes to understand what they're doing. It's not something that's automatic, so it's time consumptive on the part of the staff who are working to move our annexation efforts forward. So that's the general issue around annexation. Around donut holes specifically, what I would suggest, if you all are minded to look into this matter further, is first of all that the planning staff work with IT and our GIS folks to do an analysis to just figure out where all the donut holes are, to just do the mapping exercise, to look at what size we're focusing on, and just to really understand the issue with a high degree of expertise. Right now, you can look at the map and you can see visually where they are, but what parcels are included? What's the general acreage of those parcels? What is the type of property owner or property use, to really dig into the issue and produce an analysis? That's something that is not automatic or easy to do, but it can be done. So that's the first thing that I would recommend is get with our IT staff and let's analyze it and really just look at what we're dealing with. That's the first piece. And then second, we could review after having looked at the scope of the challenge, what kind of effort we would need to begin annexation on some of those donut holes and to begin looking at closing them. And this is something that I think after our comprehensive plan is completed, we could look at reallocating some resources on staff to that effort. And it's something that, again, is not a foreign thing to us. But focusing specifically on donut holes could be done after we've analyzed it and we've really got a handle around where they are, how big they are, and what kind of properties we're looking at. So I'll end with that and can answer questions as needed.
Thank you, Jacob. Okay. Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor.
It's kind of ironic that we have on the agenda almost next Mr. Andrade, who earlier role with the city was in fact he was our annexation master for years, and I'd be curious to hear his comments on this. I would just suggest that we follow Jacob's recommendation, do some research on this and come back, and in the interest of time, move on forward because we do have a 4 o'clock Public Works Committee meeting as well. But after Ernest makes his little presentation about West Edge and Digital Carter, here's the expert right here.
We could nab them while we got them on. So let's why don't we do this? We've got 2 controversial annexations, I presume. I'm being facetious in saying that.
I'll move for approval. I'll move for approval on both of them, Mr.
On I and E2, Madam.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Is there a second on those 2 annexations?
Second. I'll second.
Okay. All those in favor say by aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Aye. The ayes have it. Thank you all. We took care of those rather quickly. So we'll call on Ernest if he wants to give us an update on the Charleston Digital Corridor, and if you wouldn't mind, just sort of if you could pick up on what the mayor's comment was Mr. Mayor. Yes, sir.
Just by way of introduction, I know everybody knows Ernest, but he is the director of Charleston Digital Carter, but really the reason I invited him here was to give us a report on our property over at West Edge, which is technology related, but he also has been managing that for us. I'm sure he'll give us a overview of the new property on Morrison, but particularly I wanted him to share with you how things have been going with our rental property over at West Edge.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can everybody hear me?
Loud and clear.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for having me as well. To the issue of annexation, I'll be very brief on this. I had hoped that by now our legislative community would have gotten really enlightened and the state would have passed a law eliminating these donut holes. This continues to be a problem in towns like Mount Pleasant, on James Island, West Ashley. I do agree with your sentiment that it is inefficient for two levels of government to be servicing an area as finite as this, and it makes absolutely no sense. Unfortunately, the political forces seem to overwhelm the administrative forces in an issue like this, and that's a little disappointing. That said, we have to work within the confines of the state law, and those changes have not come about, which I hoped. We were pretty aggressive on the annexations, during my tenure, and the intention was to have some consolidation, which would be smart government. Listen, I know time is limited, so I want to jump in very quickly. I was thrilled to give the mayor a tour of West Edge, and I encourage any of you who have not been, I'd be happy to give you a tour of either West Edge and the Charleston Tech Center as it comes to fruition. Just by way of reminder, the last summer, it was June, I believe, that the real estate committee voted to proceed with the lease at West Edge for 8,000 square feet with a monthly price tag of $24,000 a month in lease payments. We got underway. We handled the entire outfit of the space and delivered it. It was delivered. The CO was April 3rd, a time when nobody wanted to really receive any real estate. I was a little nervous, but I'm really pleased to tell you that by May, we were all but one space leased. And in June, we were at 100% leased. And I think what's significant about that is in June, we were running on receivables of $24,050 ahead of basically our liability, the city's liability. So I think in this environment, when people are running for the hills in real estate, we were actually able to deliver a return to the city beyond their investment on a monthly basis. Today, the building continues to be leased, and we actually are returning to the city $24,700, so $700 more than the city's investing on a monthly basis. I will say that the intent of the council when you took the action was to support the life sciences industry, and I'm pleased to tell you that we have 16 offices at West Edge, and 13 of them are essentially occupied by life sciences companies. And Vicor Scientific is one of the companies that started with 3 offices, and today they have just about the whole space. They've added 200 jobs since the pandemic started in the molecular testing space, and COVID was a blessing to them, I guess, because they do a lot of the testing related to COVID. So I think what I'm here to say is your intention of supporting life science economic development has materialized in a very challenging environment. So for that, I appreciate it. We have about 50 employees who are of these 5 different companies that are working in that space as we speak. And we even have this week and last week and this week, I think for the next 2 weeks, we actually have an employee from a San Francisco-based company that's using what I call the touchdown spaces that are available to anybody in the life science industry or our members who'd like to go use their open desks. So with that, it's 8,000 feet at West Edge. It's fully leased, and it has spurred other activities, around the life science community, and we fully realize the investment that was made and the leadership that was made by the mayor and you guys on city council. So with that, I appreciate it. Are there any questions on that before I move over to the tech center?
Any questions from council, committee members? Okay.
Real quickly.
Mr. Chairman, I don't have a question, but I just have an affirmation. Unfortunately, I think you were not in the building a week ago Friday, Ernest, but I had a great tour of 22 and I saw your shop, and it was a Friday afternoon and there were still a lot of people there working. So that's a testimony. It looked great.
Thank you, Madam Councilwoman. So, I think, it's times like this, it's challenging times, recessionary times, environments like this, where I'm extremely pleased that this mayor and city council has supported the diversification of our economy. And a big step in that direction was the investment of land resources and a parking facility, which is now quickly becoming the Charleston Tech Center. The garage is actually scheduled to be turned over to the city next month, if you believe it. And it's basically ready. It's hard to believe that AT&T would delay the delivery of anything just because of putting a phone line for the elevators. But in terms of the construction, we're almost there. On the office building, again, I come back to these challenging times. Here's a little bit of perspective for you. It's 92,000 square feet, an 816 space garage. Off that 92,000 square feet, subtract out 15,000, which is the ground floor, 14,000 the ground floor, and you've got the rest for office space for tech and tech related companies. Where we sit right now is 70% of the building, of the office portion is leased out. And the ground floor, obviously, things went a little soft in the retail and restaurant environment, but that's slowly coming back. So the ownership is in conversations to bring some of that back. And I think you'd be well pleased when you find out what kind of retail and restaurant is kind of in the mix as well. So I think it's a beautiful thing to be able to say that the city leveraged their $1.8 million, $1.775 million, almost $1.8 million investment for $54 million. And we still own, basically, you will still have a phase two, 0.4 of an acre to leverage a second office building that could be as big as the first office building. In terms of the impact, we are starting to see two of the companies that have signed reasonably sized leases are from outside the community, and we are in the midst of our upfit on the flagship space, which is something that is unlike anything this town has seen. It's two things that are very significant for the whole building. It is the safest office building in the city of Charleston. It has got UV filters in the entire building and MERV 15 AC. So we are not at all concerned about a pandemic and all the facts that have been thrown out there, from whether it's touching and whether it's sneezing and that kind of thing. It's got its filtration at the highest level of any office building in the city of Charleston. Secondly, and most important, I think something that we will have, that building will have a 10 gig symmetric connection from a tier 1 provider. That is unprecedented. There is no office building in the city of Charleston that has anywhere close to a 10 gig symmetric being it's the same up as it is down connection in the city of Charleston. So we're setting, beyond the architecture, beyond the garage that is significant, we're setting some pretty high standards for new office development in the city of Charleston. We're doing it in an opportunity zone. We're doing it in another federal, I'm trying to think of a hub zone. So that's attractive in itself. So I think I'll stop there. The office component is scheduled to come online in January, but the garage component and adjacent park is scheduled to be completed next month. And I can tell you that I couldn't do it without the support of the mayor and all of you members, basically, on the real estate committee. I'll stop right there and answer any questions.
Thank you. Thanks for that report. Very enlightening and very interesting information you're sharing with us. So is there any comments from anybody or questions for Ernest? Don't be shy. Well, thank you.
I'm going to
Yes, sir.
add one more, if I may, about West Edge. I want to thank Ernest for stepping up to plate and helping us. Our lease, of course, at the time helped the building get underway. And then it was a bit of a risk for the city to do that. But I believe the dividends have paid off. We helped attract a business to Charleston that could have gone to Philadelphia. The owners we met just the other day of Icor Scientific. And they said, Mayor, if this building hadn't been here, we would have been in Austin or Philadelphia or Boston or somewhere else. And 200 good paying jobs have come online this year because of just that one company. And part of that reason was that we had the extra space available for them to use in addition to the wet lab being provided up on the top floor. So the strategy to provide some higher paying jobs, science-based, technology-based, medical-based is working. We can do more, and that's what this other CTC building is going to do. So my hat's off to you, Ernest, and thank you for stepping up to the plate.
Well, I would say one last thing, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for that.
Yep.
I want to tell you members, as council members and as the mayor, we have an obligation to not get distracted with short-term economic items like this. This can be very distracting and very noisy. But I think that I certainly appreciate your steadfast approach to diversifying economy and staying the course. As long as I'm at the helm, you can rest assured that we're going to get a higher return by a factor of 5 to 10 than what the city has invested. And I appreciate you standing firm with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ernest.
And using the diversity word, when I toured West Edge, I went, the Vicor establishment has all of their labs in the core of their space. So you can literally walk the perimeter and look in on the staff that's doing the lab work through big plate glass windows. It's fascinating. And that company is probably more diverse percentage-wise than any private employer that we have. Is that right, Ernest? I think Mr. Reese, who gave me the tour, said it was like 26% of the overall professional staff are primarily African Americans, local people who were trained and hired right here. So we need to keep more of that pipeline going. I saw the same thing when I went to the iron yard. There's a lot of room for, bringing people in through the jobs pipeline that we need to be creating out of our commission work.
Yes, ma'am.
It's all working together.
Yes, ma'am.
Right. Good point.
Mr. Chairman, at risk of bleeding into the public works, I too, Mr. Mayor, want to give kudos to Mr. Andrade. During the early days of this thing, there were a lot of fits and stops and fits and starts and then stop again. And I'm going to tell you, Ernest was the person that kept it going. But for Ernest, we say in jest, this beautiful building that's going up right now, along with that parking garage, it just wouldn't have happened. It just flat out would not have happened. So in addition to his partners being pioneers up on that side with that Class A office building, Ernest, frankly, had to lobby the city. So he wore many hats and made believers out of a vision that simply wasn't there at the time. So congratulations. Obviously, we're all in this together right now. But let me tell you, in the early days, it wasn't as easy as it looks now driving by on Morrison Drive. So thank you for all your hard work and caring, Ernest.
Thank you, sir.
By the way, we might want to bring you back on this annexation thing when that building finishes up.
I'm happy to
have you wear more than one.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
We have one more item on our agenda that was a late add, and we're really cutting into our Public Works Committee. But is Lori Yarber on with us?
I am, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. So this is a late addition. I think it was last week or the week before last, I received an email from a concerned citizen about pool access and the non-accessibility of the WL pool and Martin Luther King, because we're doing some work over there. So all this sort of came together kind of rapidly. I included Lori on those email chains, and I wasn't realizing that other things were going on, as my math teacher said, simultaneously together at the same time with some other development. So I see Janie's on the phone with us as well. So Lori, are you going to pick up on this, or is Janie going to talk about this first?
I can talk about it, Chairman. Thank you. Janie can just back me that it's all legal. So yes, we are waiting on MLK and the wonderful renovations that are going on there. And so as the temperatures have dropped, we've got a lot of small kids that are swimming on our swim team. Families and parents are not happy about those drop in temperatures. So we reached out to our friends over at St. Andrews Parks and Playgrounds. They're going to rent us pool space, 3 to 4 lanes between 4 and 7, Monday through Friday, starting tomorrow, if this all is approved by you all, to let us rent some pool space until we are in MLK, until we kind of understand what we're going to do with WL Stevens. So this is a short-term measure. I think it's a great solution. It's centrally located. It's a fair price. They included lifeguards, and this will get our kids out of outdoor pools and into an indoor pool until our renovations are complete and we can move into MLK.
Okay. So I will entertain a motion to approve this.
Move for approval, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second it. But what's the cost, Mr. Chairman?
So Lori or Janie?
So,
It's $2,934.
All right, good.
and Councilmember Waring, if we don't need it, they've actually allowed us to put this rental agreement together through the first week in November. If we don't need all those dates, we can back out. So it may end up being cheaper if we're able to get into our pool quicker.
Okay, listen, I think the cost is very reasonable. I just want to know what it was. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right. Any other comments, questions, etc.? And at this point, I entertain a motion to approve item G in our agenda.
I think we had a motion.
We got a motion, carry the motion.
Yeah, so this is a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. All right.
Yeah.
Well, Lori, again, thank you, and Janie, thank you all for stepping up to the plate literally on this. And you can make a lot of people happy over in West Ashley. And
Yeah.
I'm sure.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for your.
Thank you. Is there any further business? Otherwise, we'll transition into our Public Works meeting. And this meeting is hereby ended.
Yes, sir.
Thank you all very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right.
Aye.